Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'll try to be very quick because yesterday we had a similar topic. My colleague Konstantin Dole spoke about these migrations, but now I'll try to be more, so to say, comprehensive for one of these migration waves. So there were two events that provoked a great turbulence in the region of Western Eurasia and in the Balkans and East Central Europe in the beginning of the 13th century. The first was the campaign of Thirteenth-Century. You can see here this campaign, which is well known to everyone here, I'm sure. And it started as a scout raid, however, with a massive impact on the territories of Western Eurasia. Mongols defeated many local peoples and plundered vast territories, leaving their mark on the local population. They have been perceived as a sudden disaster and an imminent threat in the following decades, especially after their decisive victory at the River Kalka over the united Cuman and Kipchak forces and the army of Rus. Their consequent retreat to the east perhaps was met with false hopes that they would not return. The second event was the Western campaign from 1236-1242, which is in fact in the focus of our conference now. It was already a well-planned attack on Western Eurasia and East Central Europe, affecting also the Northern Balkans at the end of the campaign. Its purpose was revenge and conquest. It fulfilled completely its goals. The Rus principalities were subdued. It is the fall of Kiev, like a landmark of these events. The Cumans were conquered or forced to flee. Volga, Bulgaria was completely destroyed as well as a revenge, and Hungary and Poland were ravaged, and even Moravia, as we understood also yesterday from this excellent account of Thomas, was affected. The Northern Balkans were also subdued, and Danubian Bulgaria most likely became a Mongol vassal. On the eve of the Mongol attack in Central Europe and the Balkans, there were other conflicts south of the Danube. After his victory over the Epirots in 1230, the Bulgarian Tsar Jonathan II started a complicated diplomatic and military game aiming to secure Bulgaria's hegemony on the peninsula. In 1232, he ended the union with the Roman Church, and in 1235, with Nicene support, succeeded to restore the autocephalous Bulgarian Orthodox Patriarchate. Bulgarian Nicene anti-Latin coalition seemed to be unbreakable, and both armies at one point besieged Constantinople. Later, the Bulgarian Tsar changed sides, broke the alliance with the Niceans, and even besieged Toulon, the main Nicene stronghold in Thrace, together with the Latins. The following sudden retreat of the Bulgarian forces has been explained in various ways in the historiography and dated in general to 1237, although John Langdon stated that it happened in 1238. As one possible reason for Tsar Jonathan II's behavior was forwarded a theory that he felt religious fear being accused of being an oath breaker. Most probably, this sudden move of the Bulgarians was provoked by some other reasons. A new massive Mongol attack started in Western Eurasia and in the Near East in 1236-1237. This time, these were not intelligence raids, but a planned invasion in already well-explored areas. This attack, beside many other well-known consequences, such as the end of Volga, Bulgaria, devastation of the southern areas of Rus, together with the sack of Kiev in 1240, and the total chaos in the Pontic Steppes, provoked massive migrations of the Cumans westward to Hungary and Bulgaria. Around 1237, according to George Acropolitis, there was the first announcement of a large group of Cumans coming across the Danube and settling in Macedonia, that is present-day Thrace, around Hebrus and Adrianople. It is important to quote this passage because it is the only one providing a reliable information, relatively reliable, of course, about such a settlement. At that time, the people of the Scythians, after being attacked by the Tatars, all those who could escape the latter sword, crossed the Istros on skins together with their women and children. And as the Bulgarians protested because the Scythians were a great number of soldiers, the latter took the lands of Macedonia. Some of them created pastures along the river of Hebros, and another group in the lower lands and along the river called by the disorderly flowing language Maritza. In fact, it is Hebros which is springing from the Hemus, and from that point is flowing into the Aegean Sea. Based on an Arab source from Egypt, Ibn Tagribirdi Abu Mahasin Yusuf, from the 15th century, one of our famous scholars, Cuman Refugees, has suggested that these Cumans settled south of the Danube against the will of the Tsar. According to this source, Bulgarians attacked the refugees, and some of them, among them also the future famous Sultan Baybars, were sold as slaves as far as Egypt to form later the Egyptian upper military aristocracy and the ruling dynasty there. In fact, it was a later group of refugees, and this has been already commented at length by Dr. Golev previous day, and I think he is quite right following this pattern that if this group actually migrated to Bulgaria, it was a different group coming by sea, and of course settling in a valley between two mountains, which could be the chain of valleys between Stara Planina and Sredna Gora. It is possible, of course, which was a frontier zone between Bulgarians and the Latins, or at that time, of course, it was under Bulgarian control. The suggestion of Cuman Refugees remains debatable also because from the Greek source, from Acropolitis, one may get the impression that the Bulgarians let these Cumans pass, although having protested against their movement, regarding this opportunity as a convenient exit of the situation. Jonathan II probably succeeded in holding part of the group of the Danubian plain, which is, of course, not quite sure, but the greater part continued to Thrace, which is Macedonia, in Acropolitis' account. Most probably, there was not an acute conflict between the Cumanic migrants and the Bulgarians. They simply continued their movement to the south, since remaining in Bulgaria they could provoke Mongol attack, as it happened later in Hungary because of Kutan's Cumans. I have to add here also that there was a strong alliance between Cumans and Bulgaria in the first half of the 13th century, which is a well-known established fact, and probably Jonathan II avoided a direct conflict with the refugees, offering them simply to pass through his kingdom, his tsardom, without confronting them. Another piece of information about the Cumanic settlers in Thrace can be found in Nicephorus Gregoras, which is a later author, of course. According to him, in the time of John III, Ducas Vatasis, pushed by the European Scythians, in his work, Scythians is a term used for the Tatars, Mongols, because they were already rulers of the steppe region, the Cumans were forced to settle in Thrace and Macedonia. The passage is important since it contains additional information about this wave of Cuman settlers. Telepugas, according to Gregoras, of course it is Telebuga, but not with the real person, nothing in common. According to Gregoras, it is one of the sons of Chinggis Khan. After reaching the springs of the Tanais, attacked the European peoples, who were numerous and different. Those who were in the middle of the country were fragments and remnants of the ancient Scythians, who were divided into nomads and ploughmen. The first of them, who lived close to the Meotis, the Azov Sea, and were inhabiting the coast of the Black Sea, namely the Zykians, the Abazgians, the Goths, and the Amaxobioi, the nomads, the Tauroscythians, and the Borystenites, the people around Dnieper, and furthermore those who had their pastures in Mesia around the mouth of the Danube. They were named Huns and Cumans. There were people who called them Scythians as well. These peoples, terrified by the heavy and irresistible attack of the presently invading Scythians, recognized that they had to move elsewhere. There was no hope that they can resist to the invaders, but everything bowed, the towns and peoples, and as the ears of the wheat in the summer threshing floor, they were crushed and destroyed. That is why they, the Cumans, discouraged of the war with the Scythians, crossed the Danube on skins filled with hay instead of boats together with their women and children, and wandered enough long time around Thrace, searching for a place convenient for their settlement, being not less than 10,000. Alexander Nikolov quotes and comments in his dissertation at length another Arab source inside, announcing about a group of course, other authors did this as well. I'm quoting Kuzelas because I read this dissertation many years ago, and it was a real delight to do this, announcing about a group of Cumans that settled in the territory of the Empire of Constantinople. This is the Latin Empire around that time. These Cumans, according to Alberic of Trafontaine, were predestined to destroy Asen and Vatatius, the enemies of the Latins, despite of the fact that they were pagans and not Christians. The new settlers became Latin mercenaries and took part in the conquest of Tourlon, the key Nicaean stronghold in eastern Thrace in 1240. Jean de Joinville described in detail the conclusion of the alliance between the Latins and the Cumans, which is also confirmed by the marriages of 3 Cumanic princesses and 3 prominent Latin barons. However, one of the Cumanic chieftains, Jonas, died soon after the siege of Tourlon, while the other one, Saronius, changed his loyalty and became Nicaean ally, taking part in the siege of Salonika in 1242 on the Nicaean side. According again to Alexander Nikolov, these Cumanic groups were located in Thrace and Macedonia, but also in Phrygia in Asia Minor. They were split into smaller groups and stationed around the Nicaean frontier. There they became a shield against the local Turkoman tribes who were plundering the border areas. Another possible area of settlement of these Cumans became Paphlagonia, especially the territory close to the town of Amastris. And you can see here Phrygia and Paphlagonia on this map. These are areas which were disputed between Nicaeans and Seljuks at that time. And a medieval map of Paphlagonia and Phrygia you can see here as well. So, Dmitry Korobeinikov, in another very important article, identified a group of Kipchaks that survived up to the Ottoman conquest. He commented on the modern Turkish dialects of Paphlagonia following the Turkish linguists, especially the dialects of Parthenia, it's Bartın, close to Amastris, and Kastamonu on the former Nicaean Byzantine Seljuk border, but mostly on the Byzantine side. His suggestion that this area was exactly the final asylum for the greater part of the Cumanic refugees from 1237-1238 sounds very convincing and is corroborated by the linguistic research. And I'll be a bit more concise here in the conclusion. The Cumanic refugees wave of 1237-1238 provoked turbulence on the Balkans. It influenced also the conflicts among Bulgarians, Latins, and Nicaean Byzantines. Most probably, the largest part of these refugees ended up as Nicaean allies in the border areas of the empire in Asia Minor, such as Paphlagonia and Phrygia. Smaller groups could have remained in modern Eastern Thrace. Do they have any relation to the so-called Thracian Gagauz or Surguts and the Christian Turks from Zikni in Greek Macedonia? It's a matter that could be solved through thorough investigation of their Turkish dialects, probably. Perhaps these Cumanic refugees do not have any relation to the larger Gagauz population of Dobruja and to the Pomaks of the Rodopi region. At least the sources do not provide information for their settlement in these areas, despite some theories seeking such a link. And only in addition, I would like to say a few words. The linguistic research is, of course, helpful, but in the case with the Southern Balkans, it's very difficult to follow the local dialects because we had a lot of exchanges of population after the Balkan Wars. So the original population of Eastern Thrace actually has been expelled, I mean the Christian population, and most probably the descendants of these Cumans who settled on Byzantine or Latin soil, firstly were baptized as Christians, and maybe later some of them were Islamized. So it's very complicated to follow the original population of these areas now in 20th and 21st century. In Asia Minor, the situation was more stable because we don't have such change of borders after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. So maybe also archaeology would help, but I'm also very suspicious about that because for the moment we don't have a lot of serious and concrete results about Cumanic settlers in the Balkans from archaeology. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for this very inspiring paper.